Welcome to The Source, where we combine the headlines with in-depth conversations with the newsmakers themselves. I'm Pinky Webb. Today on the program, the task force investigating alleged massive corruption inside PhilHealth says they've only just begun. And more PhilHealth officials may face charges. Also, lawmakers questioning the findings of Task Force PhilHealth. Is Health Secretary Francisco Duque off the hook? We'll also get an update on the manual on the controversial Good Conduct Time Allowance law, or GCTA, and the implementing rules for the anti-terrorism law. Justice Secretary Menardo Guevarra joins us live. Investigators found key officials of PhilHealth negligent in some of their duties, including the implementation of the controversial Interim Reimbursement Mechanism, or IRM. Task Force PhilHealth also found some members of the executive committee purposely withheld information and documents to obtain approval on their requested budget allocations for the procurement of certain ICT projects. Task Force also highlighted the agency's corporate policies and practices, which have failed to check and penalize irregularities by agency personnel and healthcare institutions. Let's go straight to the source of the story. We have Justice Secretary and Task Force PhilHealth Head Menardo Guevarra. Secretary Guevarra, welcome to the source, and thank you for your time, sir.
Pinky, good morning, and good morning to your televiewers this morning.
Great, I can hear you, sir. So let me begin with Task Force PhilHealth. Some senators are questioning why Secretary Duque was not included in the list of the recommended filing of criminal and administrative charges. Why was he not recommended to be charged, Secretary?
Pinky, medyo naputol yung iyong question, no? But I suppose that you were referring to Secretary Duque. Anyway, if the question is why was Secretary Duque not included in the recommended administrative or criminal actions by the task force? First, I'd like to clarify, Pinky, that the findings of the task force were preliminary in nature because we have only covered three major areas where fraud is heavily suspected, and that's in the area of IT procurement, in the area of the legal sector, and in the IRM. So we have only focused our attention on these areas, and insofar as Secretary Duque is concerned, we have not seen enough evidence that would make us recommend that he be charged administratively or criminally. So let me just explain also the nature of the job of Secretary Duque. First of all, he's a member, or rather the chair of a collegial body, which is the board of directors of PhilHealth. He's not a standalone figure in PhilHealth like the president or the vice president. He belongs to a collegial group, the board, and he is the head of that group. And under the law, he does not vote. He is not required to vote. Only the members of the board have voting powers, but the chairman himself does not vote. Anyway, I'm just trying to say that he cannot be isolated like any other executive officer of the board. Now, essentially what I'm saying is, insofar as the areas that the task force have investigated, we have not seen sufficient evidence as against the chairman. But it doesn't mean to say that when we conduct further investigations, when we go more deeply into the evidence or other transactions or other areas of fraud, we are absolutely and totally exonerating the secretary or the other members of the board. So it all depends on what we may see further in the future.
Right. Secretary, then why would there be a difference? Maybe you can explain this to us with the recommendation of the Senate Committee of the Whole charging Secretary Duque and I believe seven others. And how is your finding, the Task Force PhilHealth, any different from theirs? Because they found him liable.
Pinky, we are not certain as to the kind or quality of evidence that was presented before the Senate. No, the task force went by the evidence actually presented before it. So there is a strong possibility that the evidence presented before the Senate is not exactly the same as the evidence presented before the task force. And there's also a
Mm.
big difference probably in the appreciation, in the manner of appreciating the evidence. The purpose of the Senate when it conducted its inquiry is that it is supposed to be in aid of legislation. But of course, they have the liberty to recommend legal actions as well against people whom they may find culpable. The mandate of the task force is to determine criminal or civil liability. So, doon nagkakaiba yung purpose eh. Pagdating sa amin, sa task force, ang tinitingnan namin is the possibility of filing charges if we find na merong some wrongdoing, no? And that's the
Mm-mm.
job of investigators and prosecutors like people in the DOJ. We have been trained to do this. This is our job. So we're not saying that baka may misappreciation on the part of the Senate, no? Because precisely baka iba yung set of evidence presented before the Senate, iba yung sa task force. But what I'm saying is baka nagmamatter yan sa appreciation of the evidence presented before us. Kasi
Mm-mm.
kami, as the
I
OJ,
understand.
when we file complaints before, for example, the ombudsman, we want to make sure that we have the necessary testimonial, documentary, and other types of evidence to establish probable cause. Hindi kami basta magfa-file ng complaint for the sake of filing a complaint. We've got to be sure that the complaint that we are filing are backed up is backed up by sufficient evidence to determine to establish probable cause. Kasi the DOJ and any other investigating agency will be representing the people of the Philippines. Kaya we want to make sure na yung ifa-file ng DOJ on behalf of the people is not garbage.
Uh-uh. Secretary, can you explain this briefly, if possible, to us? Because I did hear also Secretary Roque say that regarding the case of or the issue on Secretary Duque, and sinabi ho niya, there was negligence, and not in these words, Secretary, sa IRM and even dun sa IT contracts. However, there were documents and facts that were actually hidden by the EXECOM from the board of directors. What exactly are these information or papers that were hidden or not told to the board of directors?
Ang naging problema kasi ng board of directors ay they were fed incomplete information or were misguided by certain legal conclusions or legal opinions, no? In the case of the IRM, for example, itong board ratified certain releases from the IRM but not realizing na in effect ay hindi pa talaga in effect itong circular nila, no, because it had not been uh, adequately published in the sense na meron pang requirement na ma-file yan doon sa Office of the Administrative Register, no, of the Philippines, no. So that is based at the UP College, UP Law Center. So kung hindi siya duly filed with the owner, hindi pa siya enforceable. So apparently, nobody advised properly the board, no, about this. May mga lawyers in the board, but and they are supposed to be charged with knowledge. But hindi naman kasi talaga in
Mhm.
reality, hindi naman lahat ng lawyers kasi ay maaalala ang lahat ng legal requirements. So that's an example to withhold taxes, no, on the IRM releases. Kasi itong releases na to ng IRM are in the nature of advance payments, no, to hospitals and medical professionals. So dapat meron din yan na withholding tax. But the board was not properly advised about that need. In fact, yung legal sector mismo and yung finance people sa PhilHealth realized too late that they omitted to withhold taxes on the
Mm-mm.
IRM releases. So
Mm-mm.
ganun din doon sa kaso ng IT equipment, no. Parang the board was fed with ambiguous information, sometimes falsified data. Kaya parang they were made to parang adopt certain budget
Mm-mm.
proposals without complete understanding or without complete information. No?
I
So
see.
to that extent, the board may be said to be hindi sila masyadong nag-exercise ng due care, but as we said in the report, this
Yeah.
was somehow mitigated by incomplete information being fed to the board or questionable legal opinions being submitted to them. Kaya to that
And
extent, we cannot really say that any lack of due care or
uh
negligence on the part of the board was gross or inexcusably negligent, no?
okay.
And that's why hindi namin kaya that's why we said that evidence is not really sufficient to charge them with administrative cases at least.
Okay, Secretary, I hope you can hear me. There are two questions I have on what you said. Was it intentional na hindi ho talaga or inumit some of the details doon po sa board? That's the first one, sir. And then the second one, was there any negligence, any at all, small, even a little negligence on the part of Secretary Duque?
You know, yung information that was not fed to the board, no? In the case of the ICT equipment being procured, there appears to be some willfulness on the part of yung mga subordinate officials nila, no? Board. Yung sa case of the IRM, ang tingin ko diyan parang negligence lamang talaga on the part of the subordinate officials. Kaya pati yung board nadamay, no, not realizing na hindi pa pala effective or kailangan pa na mag-withhold ng taxes bago mag-release, no. On the part of Secretary Duque, my opinion about it is that as chair of the board and also sitting in the board of so many other agencies or instrumentalities of
Mm.
government na may connected sa health, apart from being secretary of the Department of Health, apart from the problem about COVID-19, my opinion about him is that he might have spread himself too thinly. Kaya in the case of PhilHealth, baka
Mhm.
yung the proper attention due to PhilHealth might not have been given precisely because the Secretary
I
of
see.
Health has been spread too thinly doon sa dami ng kanyang responsibilities. We understand that they are
Mm-mm.
represented, no, and even the other members of the board are represented by their alternates in the board, no. Kaya hindi naman sila secretary mismo ang sometimes na nag-attend ng mga board hearings. But nonetheless, ganun ang nakikita kong situation in the case of Secretary Duque. He's just spread himself too thinly because of the many responsibilities that he is attending to. But that's not really an excuse, no.
Okay. And
Sayang dahil PhilHealth is a very important agency or corporation of the government, and I believe that
mm-mm.
more attention, especially in the light of so many anomalies or irregularities being reported, should have been given by the secretary and the members of the board to PhilHealth. Otherwise kasi talagang yung mga executive officials na lamang, those in charge of operations, of directors, they ought to be setting the policies, the directions for PhilHealth. Kaya dapat more vigilance on their part.
All right. We'll be taking a very short break. The source will be right back. You're watching The Source on CNN Philippines. I'm Pinky Webb, our guest today, Justice Secretary Menardo Guevarra. Sir, very briefly, because we need to shift topics, but I need to ask you a few more questions. So, because he spread himself too thin, as you had earlier said, do you think it's time that siguro po yung head ng board ng PhilHealth be changed to somebody else, such as the Finance Secretary, as being, as said or told by Senate President Tito Soto?
That's actually a legislative matter, Pinky. No? So I really leave it to Congress to determine what should be done with respect to the organization of PhilHealth. But my view about this is that hindi naman talaga health institution ang PhilHealth. It's an insurance, health insurance institution, no? Kaya hindi naman, I would agree with some legislators na hindi naman kailangan na Secretary of Health ang mag-chair ng PhilHealth. Because first
Mm-mm.
and foremost, it's a health insurer. It's the state health insurer. Kaya it's in the
Mm-mm.
business of insurance. Kaya talagang kailangan yung people na mayroong expertise in the insurance business, in management, in finance, and so forth and so on. Hindi naman kailangan na yung
Right.
Secretary of Health kasi wala namang health na pinag-uusapan dito talaga except the insurance in relation to health problems. Kaya
Okay.
I can agree
So you
with the proposal na i-replace yung Secretary of Health as chair of the board. Not because it's Secretary Duque, but
okay
it's because of the nature of the functions of the institution itself.
of PhilHealth, opo. And Secretary, based on the investigation of the task force, napatunayan ho ba dito na may mafia? And if so, sino po sila?
Hello. Hindi ko narinig yung question, Pinky, but I assume that you're asking. When we say mafia, we actually mean na parang may syndicate, no? To that extent, I would say na mayroon, no? Kasi itong mga nangyayari na irregularity or anomaly sa PhilHealth involving large sums of money could not have been perpetrated by one or two persons alone. So parang ang nakikita ko rito ay mayroong culture of tolerance, may culture of cooperation, if not willfully, at least in the sense that most people or many people are quite negligent in the performance of their functions. So kaya nagmumukha na synchronized yung mga nangyayaring irregularity. No? So to that extent, parang may syndicated efforts, whether by negligence or by actual willful acts, ay meron. No? Hindi mangyayari ito if this is committed by one or two persons
Opo.
only.
Okay. And how would you describe the extent of corruption in PhilHealth, Secretary?
We have seen only so far itong areas ng information and communications technology and the IRM and the legal sector, no? And prevalent, I would say na talagang prevalent and unchecked kasi, no? That's the problem. If all of these irregularities were checked much sooner by people who had been more vigilant, then probably hindi mag-worsen yung situation at PhilHealth. But the problem is, walang masyadong disciplinary actions taken. Not many legal actions were brought before the proper fora. Kaya nangyari ay nagkaroon ng parang sort of culture of tolerance, parang uh, kanya-kanya tayo, wala na tayong pakialaman, so diskarte mo to, diskarte ko to, or something like that, no? Kaya lumala
Mm-mm.
yung situation sa PhilHealth. That is why I would say na talagang medyo there is a festering culture of irregularity, of fraud, and corruption within PhilHealth, and that's what we need to address. And that's why I'm happy that the
But
new
that's also,
president of PhilHealth is somebody who came from the National Bureau of Investigation, because he has the eye to see kung nasaan ang mga irregularities or criminal acts or corrupt acts being perpetrated within PhilHealth.
but the question and the allegations on PhilHealth is not something new, Secretary. So because of what you said, dahil nga andyan yan, yung iba po nagkanya-kanya, wasn't it also the responsibility of the board na talagang tutukan ito because this is not new?
Yeah, that's what I was saying kanina, Pinky. Kala ko nawala eh. Sorry, I lost you for a
We'll be
while.
taking a very short break. Okay, we'll be right back. You're watching The Source on CNN Philippines. Our guest today, Justice Secretary Menardo Guevarra. Secretary, we need to shift topics. Good Conduct Time Allowance that was suspended, I believe, August of last year. Is there any update on the operations manual of the GCTA?
Yes, Pinky. If you will remember, the processing of GCTA was suspended temporarily last year when the DOJ and the DILG worked on the revised implementing rules and regulations. No? So we have come up with that new set of IRR, the revised IRR. It's a lot clearer than the one before it. And after that, the task force immediately went to the preparation of the updated manual, which will be uniformly used in both the BJMP, those are the city jails, and also in the Bucor, our prisons, and the provincial jails. No? So we have finished that manual. It's just a matter of printing it so that actual copies can be sent to the various wardens of the jails and our prison facilities and prison farms across the country. Matter of printing only, but we have completed that. There was a little delay because of the many complicated issues that were posed in the preparation of the manual, but we're done with that.
So what are the key points of the updated manual, sir?
Yung mga issues pertaining to heinous crimes were made clearer in the manual. Kasi yung question of what is really a heinous crime has to be broken down para maintindihan mabuti ng mga wardens natin at saka people in charge of assessing and granting good conduct time allowance. Kasi excluded yan from good conduct time allowance yung those found guilty of heinous crimes. So ang question is, ano-ano ba yung mga heinous crimes na yun? So we had to go and identify, categorize certain crimes and offenses. Alin dito yung matatawag na heinous, alin yung hindi. So that is one of the main obstacles that now had to be clarified.
Yeah. So which are the heinous crimes, sir? Because those convicted of heinous crimes will not be allowed under the GCTA, from my understanding. And those that are heinous crimes but will be, I guess, categorized as a lesser heinous crime, pwede hong mag-avail ng GCTA?
Yung heinous crimes kasi, ang ginawa namin categorization dyan, merong mga certain crimes which are punishable by death under the death penalty law. Of course, we don't have that anymore, But there was an enumeration there. So, automatically, yung mga punishable by death ay sinama namin doon sa category ng heinous crimes, Hindi nga lang ma-enforce yung penalty ng death. Now, we, as another category, ay yung mga crimes na punishable by life imprisonment or reclusion perpetua to death. So may range yon, no? So depending na yon doon sa appreciation of the judge in the particular case. So doon naman, I will have to base yung categorization of a particular offense as heinous depending on the circumstances found by the judge. So yun ang mga considerations na tinitingnan namin in making classifications of heinous crimes. And of course, there are certain crimes that by decisions of the Supreme Court, no, under jurisprudence, ay sinabi ng Supreme Court na heinous. And for that reason, ay isinama rin namin doon sa manual in order to guide our wardens, our committee, no, screening and granting or assessing good conduct time allowance for their use, no, para hindi sila nalilito, bigyan ba or not.
Okay. So, Secretary, si Mayor Sanchez ho ba, will he be eligible under the GCTA?
Well, yung kanyang eligibility will be under the old provisions of the revised penal code, no? Kasi entitled na siya noon pa nung hindi pa lumalabas yung new GCTA law, ay meron na siyang entitlement under the revised penal code. Kaya lamang, yung entitlement under the revised penal code is much less compared to the huge benefits of good conduct na binibigay under the revised or rather the expanded GCTA law, which was promulgated or became law in 2013. So using yung standards ng revised penal code, medyo hindi pa eligible for release si Mayor.
Okay. Justice Secretary Menardo Guevarra, I'd like to thank you for now. We're going to say goodbye on television, but we will continue our discussion on Facebook. Thank you for joining us here on The Source. I'm Pinky Webb. You're watching CNN Philippines.